They all applauded the day I left Crest Harbor. It was a relief, really. A madwoman like me would no longer monopolize the city's headlines. Until, 3 years later, I was back on the front page. It was because of the first thing I did upon my return. It wasn't a trip home, it was a visit to the cemetery. That day, I happened to run into my brother, Reese Beaumont. He asked me, "All these years, why didn't you come home?" I tightened my grip on the flimsy oncology report in my hand. I managed a strained smile. "I'll be home soon." I hadn't expected the reunion with my brother Reese to be so utterly flat. There was none of the old razor-sharp animosity. 3 years ago, we were notorious tabloid fodder, the siblings known for pure, unadulterated hatred. "When did you get back?" I looked at the sprig of jasmine in his hand, Mom's favorite flower, and felt a momentary lapse in reality. "Yesterday. Yesterday was Dad's birthday." His voice was as cool and distant as ever. "Since you were back in Crest Harbor, why didn't you come?" "Because I didn't want to." Reese's brow furrowed as he stared at me. "Rana, are you still holding a grudge against us?" I shook my head slightly. How could I hold a grudge? The moment I left Crest Harbor, the hatred I felt for anyone here dried up. I simply figured Dad wouldn't want to see me at his birthday dinner. He and Reese hated me equally, because I was the one responsible for Mom's death. If I hadn't thrown a tantrum for a birthday cake on my 8th birthday, Mom wouldn't have gone out. She wouldn't have fallen into the hands of our family's rivals and been brutally tortured and killed. I still remember Dad cradling her body, his agonizing sobs echoing through the foyer. I remember Reese kneeling on the floor, his eyes bloodshot as he screamed at me to get out. That day, Dad lost his beloved wife. Reese lost his mother. They withdrew every ounce of love they had given me, and they started to hate me. Reese's gaze softened, a complicated expression flitting across his face. He leaned closer. "Rana," he paused, then continued, "you look different. You've become much quieter." I offered a weak smile. If I had changed, it was only that I'd stopped expecting anything from them. Not long after Mom died, they brought Savannah Davies home, the impoverished student Mom had been sponsoring. They didn't give her cold shoulders, didn't ignore her, and certainly never told her to get lost. The glaring disparity in treatment drove me to hysterics, to desperate acts of demanding attention. I was too young then to understand why their hatred for me was so absolute. By the time I did understand, I had already started leaving score marks on my wrists. Still, I couldn't stop antagonizing them. At least that way, they saw me. A gentle breeze lifted the cuff of my sleeve, revealing the pale, permanent scars that were no less prominent than they had been years ago. The silence grew heavy until Reese finally said the phrase I'd been waiting for. "Come home with me." I stared down at my shoes. What home? What place was left for me in that house? For years, even the society columns had been referring to Savannah as the Beaumont heiress. My own name had long been blacklisted by the city's media. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a certifiable madwoman. It wasn't enough that I'd publicly humiliated Savannah countless times in a pathetic bid for attention. They truly believed I'd crossed the line into depravity by orchestrating her brutal kidnapping and assault by a local gang. Reese had arrived just as the ordeal ended, cradling an almost lifeless Savannah. He'd spun around and slapped me hard across the face. We had hurled the most vicious curses at each other, but he had never laid a hand on me before. "Rana, are you sick? What kind of monster are you?" The sound of his hand connecting with my cheek drowned out my single desperate syllable. "I didn't." He wouldn't believe me, because Savannah shrank back in fear, tears streaming down her face, and cried, "Reese, I'm sorry. I'll never compete with her again. Please, can't you just let me go?" My father, who rushed in right behind them, didn't believe me either. He forced me to my knees to apologize to Savannah. When I refused, he didn't hesitate. He took out his handgun and fired right into my shoulder. Blood spattered across the marble floor, but not one of them looked at me. To exact their revenge for Savannah, they had me tied up and institutionalized in a psychiatric ward. When I was released 6 months later, Dad treated